Hey, guys. Pastor Burris always used to call this Sunday Tryptophan Sunday. But I would never do that. It is so good to see you this morning. I have nothing bad to say about the Cowboys. But Michigan beat Ohio State, so we got that. Sorry. Man, it's good to see you guys. I miss you this week. I was up in Wisconsin about 75 years ago in Milwaukee. At the time, all of the world really was coming out of World War II. 1945, April of 1945 in Milwaukee, the nation was prepared for. In Europe, the war was coming to a close, but in the Pacific, it hadn't yet kind of reached its conclusion, and there was no end in sight. And so people were just wiped. They were tired. They were tired of being tired and hearing about the war and thinking about the war and worrying about their children or brothers or uncles. And so it was just really kind of a dark time. And right around that time in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is the largest city in the state of Wisconsin, they were replacing all of the bridges across the Milwaukee River. So Milwaukee, there's a river that runs right through the middle of it called Milwaukee River, and on the east of it is East Milwaukee, and on the west of it is West Milwaukee. And all of these bridges needed to be replaced. They were in bad shape. They were all very key-jawed and just out of order, and so they needed a complete replacement. And so while they were replacing these bridges, one bridge in particular that went over the Wisconsin Avenue, across the Milwaukee River on Wisconsin Avenue, while they were working on it, they looked at the pylons that they had sunk in preparation for moving this bridge and renovating it. And they're sitting at the top of this pylon, which was 4 or 5 feet, maybe even 6 feet out of the water in the Milwaukee River. There was a duck. And this duck had built a nest and had begun to lay eggs. And so this worker is like, that dumb duck has no chance. It's doomed. First, it's doomed because even if it makes it all the way to those eggs surviving and hatching, as soon as those baby ducks are born and they go off the pylon, they're not getting back into the nest. They're all going to end up dying. This duck is doomed for that reason. But on top of that, they were renovating the bridge, and that's where the bridge was supposed to go. So this duck is doomed twice over. And so this guy goes to the bar that night and is telling his friend about this doomed dumb duck which built his nest in the worst place possible. And his friend was a writer for the Milwaukee Journal, and so decided to write an article about the dumb doomed duck of the Milwaukee River. And he writes this article, and as part of that, just writes the article, it gets in the newspaper, and the next day there are dozens of people standing on the Milwaukee Avenue or the Wisconsin Avenue Bridge looking over the Milwaukee River, staring at this duck for 4 or 5 hours in a downpour of rain. And so then the worker tells his friend again, dude, there were dozens of people here watching this duck that's doomed all day long. And so then he writes another article, this time about the crowds that were watching the duck. And what happens anytime there's a crowd that forms is other people want to join it. By the end of that week, it wasn't dozens of people watching this duck. There were hundreds of people every single day that were coming to this bridge to watch this doomed duck and her eggs. They brought in a wildlife expert, and they interviewed him and talked about how normal ducks are smarter than to lay eggs on a pylon in the nasty Milwaukee River, and that this duck must be affected by living in the city. Here's a picture of the duck and her eggs. Yeah, and it's doomed. Even if it survives the fact that the bridge is going right there, even if it survives that, those ducks' eggs are going to fall once they hatch, and there's no way that it will survive. And again, people kept lining up and lining up and lining up. Eventually, a man decided, takes an orange and chucks it at the duck. That's what I thought. And then kids started taking pennies and throwing them at the duck. And adults started taking their lit cigarettes and flicking them at the nest in order to try to burn the nest. And at that point, the worker said to his friend, he was interviewed and he said, listen, if someone hurts that duck, I'm done with Milwaukee. I can't live in a city like this where people would harm this poor duck and his eggs. If something happens to the duck, I'm leaving. So another article was written. And by this point, somewhere along the line, the writer named the duck Gertie. Gertie the duck. And so it became front page news. Will Gertie and her eggs survive? People began to root for Gertie. The Boy Scouts formed a Boy Scout patrol whose whole job was to keep the kids in the crowd in line and keep them from throwing pennies at the duck. The police force actually had a special investigator who was in plain clothes, whose whole job was to mill in the crowd and keep an eye on the adults. And then the city council voted to put renovations for the bridge on hold and stayed Gertie's execution for a bit. But then there was another problem. See, upstream from where Gertie and the duck eggs were, there was an oil slick that had formed in the Milwaukee River because it's in the middle of a city and it's just disgusting, right? And so this oil slick had formed and it was moving downstream towards Gertie and her eggs, and everybody knew that once that happened, the duck would be doomed again. And so they actually opened up the gates and flushed fresh water into the Milwaukee River upstream in order that Gertie and her eggs would be saved. And at this point, the story gets picked up across the nation. Everyone from New York to Los Angeles hears the story about a duck that the entire city stops for and is paying attention to. The crowds on the Wisconsin Bridge got so large that they had to shut it down for a bit, and the city supervisor sent engineers to examine, because again, this bridge is in bad shape to begin with, and so they send engineers to see, can it actually hold up the crowds of people who were there? And they reopened it once the city superintendent confirmed that it could hold the crowds. In the spring and the summer of 1945, 2 million people visited Milwaukee in order to see Gertie and her eggs. 2 million people. The entire nation was paying attention to Gertie and her eggs. On May 31st, the first eggs hatch. And the first one, named, I think is Black Bill. Black Bill fell off the pylon immediately, right into the water. And so they sent out a rescue party. And there's a picture of the rescue party happening here. You can see the pylon there up, and then you can see the rescue party here trying to scoop Black Bill up and get him back up onto the pylon. But at that point, everyone in the nation was tuning in and following along. Eventually, there were 6 chicks, and they took them and they moved them off of the pylon, relocated them to Juneau Park, where again, crowds, you can see the crowds here, but crowds continued to form just to be able to see the famous duck and her ducklings. A few months later, Germany surrendered, ending the European portion of World War II. And the journal credited Gertie with helping the United States to forget for just a few minutes the horrible bungle that man has made of his world. In 1997, a 4-foot bronze statue of Gertie was put on the bridge. And over the following 25 years, other bronze statues of Gertie's ducklings were made as well and spread out around the bridge. Here's a picture of my family with the statue of Gertie. As we were exploring Milwaukee on Tuesday, we happened to cross the Milwaukee River and Wisconsin Avenue Bridge, and there's this statue of a duck. And we have no idea what the statue of the duck is about. We had a name, Gertie the duck, and so we started to do some research. First, I asked my brother, who lives in Milwaukee, loves the city of Milwaukee, and he had no idea about this statue of Gertie. No one knows about Gertie anymore. But for a brief period, for a few months, at the end of World War II, the whole nation from New York to Los Angeles' attention was captured by this one duck. And they all agreed that ultimately she was more than just a duck. Whether or not the eggs would hatch became a symbol of hope in a time when people needed something more to hold on to. She was something that Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and really the rest of the United States at the time could cling to. We're all kind of looking for hope. Hope is essential. We know that too. We are all looking for something in which we can vest our hope, something that can hold the weight of our hope. And this is beautiful. It's also very fleeting. This moment is gone in a moment. In Milwaukee in 1945, it was about this duck who at first was dumb and then became something more, built its nest at the top of a pylon. But it wasn't about the duck that gave people hope. Ultimately, as historians kind of examined and thought about and said, what was this phenomenon that happened with this duck in the Milwaukee River? What was that about? And over, what they came to the conclusion of what gave people hope was that the people of Milwaukee came together and cared about something for a change. And it happened just for a moment that people put aside their differences, and this poor duck, which was in trouble, in the middle of a world war where everything seemed out of control, the entire nation thought, this is something we can do. And they did it. So there was a little bit of hope. Hope for humanity, as I was reading about it, kept showing up over and over and over again. That phrase, hope for humanity, hope for humanity, hope for humanity. We can rescue a duck. Except the story is actually deeper than that. Because the whole reason why the bridges need to be replaced anyways was because exactly 100 years before, in 1845, Milwaukee was being incorporated for the very first time. And the thing was, the people of East Milwaukee did not like the people of West Milwaukee. And the people of West Milwaukee did not like the people of East Milwaukee. Right in the middle is the Milwaukee River. And when they formed their cities, they deliberately formed the cities so that the streets would never line up where they met at the Milwaukee River. So that if anybody ever tried to build a bridge across it, they couldn't make the streets connect. They did that on purpose because they didn't want anybody to go from East to West Milwaukee. And so in 1945, somebody in East Milwaukee built a bridge over to West Milwaukee. And West Milwaukee was livid. They burned the bridge down. And that started the Bridge War of Milwaukee. East Milwaukee went to war with West Milwaukee because of the bridges, and it got ugly. At one point, East Milwaukee had cannons aimed at the mayor's house and were getting ready to fire the mayor of West Milwaukee, but somebody told them at the last moment that their daughter had died the night before, and so they were like, okay, we'll give them a little space. And then somebody talked them off of that particular ledge. It was really very dark, right? And the whole reason why this bridge needed to be renovated to begin with, the reason why it was key-jawed to begin with, was because the streets don't line up for a reason, because they hated each other. But we saved a duck, so that's nice. This is humanity. This is the trouble we get into over and over and over and over again. Hope for humanity is fickle because humanity is fickle. We are constantly from one place to another. We can be 100% convinced of something in a moment and 100% convinced of the opposite the next. And so having hope in something as fickle as that, Job refers to it as like leaning against a spider web. There's a season every year where the spiders come out. And we know when that season is at our house because it's dangerous to walk around. We have lots of trees. And if you're walking through the woods, we always tell each other, hey, it's spider season out there. Spider season comes right after bug season. We know spider season is coming when just before that, it is bug season. So when we're driving and we end the day with bugs all over the front of the car, we know spider season is coming soon. And the reason why that's important is as you're walking through the yard, you can be walking and literally an inch in front of your face, you will see the web. And it is too late at that point, and then you'll see the big spider right there. It's too late. You can't stop. You're in for it, and you know it. You end up with spider web all over your face. And for a moment, you're a ninja. You know what I'm saying? Like, whatcha-ba! It's worse when you're mowing the lawn. When you're mowing the lawn, you're going at full speed, and then all of a sudden you see it, it's too late, you hit it, and then you're going sideways while you're doing the ninja thing. And you run into a tree or something. That happens all the time. But the thing about spider webs is they always give way. And that's what Job said. It's beautiful for a moment. It looks beautiful. But if you lean against it, it goes. If you grab it, it disintegrates. That type of hope, he says, is like a spider web that you lean against. And that's ultimately what hope in humanity is like, or hope for humanity. It's like the statue of a duck that no one cares about or remembers anymore. It's gone before you know it. Every year at this time, we do an Advent series. And I love this series because we talk about the same 4 things over and over and over and over again. And these are 4 things that we need to talk about over and over and over and over again. Hope, peace, joy, and love. Hope. This last week I was preparing for this message, and so I went back and I watched the message from last year on November 28th, November 27th, I think it was 28th. It would have been the 28th. November 28th, leading into the Advent series, the hope. And as I watched actually that, and then I went back and I read some of my old sermons on hope, you can see over 7 or 8 years now, the development of an understanding of the importance and the depths of hope. And I have to say, by the way, last year's message was absolute fire. I mean, it was good. If you have to get saved, okay, go back and watch that message. You will get saved. The Holy Spirit helped. It was awesome. And so you can just go to Praise Assembly or YouTube and put in Praise Assembly, Advent Hope, and you'll find it. But at Christmas, we celebrate the fact that hope has come. Right? Do you have hope? If you have hope, say, I have hope. If you don't have hope, say, meh. Busted. Not paying attention. Christmas is about hope. It's about real hope for humanity. There's this great passage in Hebrews, right at the beginning of Hebrews, actually in chapter 6 of Hebrews about hope. And I want to turn there. So grab your Bibles, open them up to Hebrews chapter 6 today. Hebrews chapter 6. While you're turning there, I want to give you a good definition of hope. And I straight up stole this from this killer preacher a year ago who spoke on hope, November 28th, 2021, because the definition of hope there was so good. The word hope is a flexible word. We use it all the time. Hey, I hope this happens. I hope this happens. It's just like when you want something good to happen, you throw in the word hope, and that's a flexible word. I hope we have pizza for dinner. I hope we have tacos. When we want something to happen in the future, that is hope. But the Bible adds something to that. The biblical definition of hope is much thicker and it's much more intense than that. The biblical definition of hope is this: the anticipation of blank. The anticipation of blank. So I can be satisfied and safe and secure. Now that blank is blank for a reason, and I'm not going to fill it in for you, because the whole point is that we are filling in that blank on a daily basis. Every day we are filling in that blank with something. There's a lot of weaving internally about narratives and all sorts of things in order to have an anticipation of something so that in the future I will be satisfied and safe and secure, right? So hope is the anticipation of future satisfaction, safety, and security, but something in particular that we put our hope on. So you find a passage like in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17, where Paul's giving instruction to Timothy on how to preach and pastor. And he tells him, specifically speaking about the people who are rich, he says, "As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy." So what is he saying? He's saying that there are some people who have a lot of money. And those people who have a lot of money have a danger of taking their hope, their expectation, and filling in that blank with those funds, that money. They pile money up, and the picture is like that we take all of our expectations for future safety and security and happiness and we set it on something. That's what Paul says here to Timothy. We put it on the table and we hope that that table holds it up, right? That is the definition of hope. It is putting our expectation and anticipation for future satisfaction and safety and security on something. So what is it that can hold that weight? And so Paul tells Timothy, hey, people who are rich, they have a real danger of using those funds as something that they are hoping in for future safety, security, and satisfaction. So they have a danger of that, and they need to be aware that they might think, oh man, I can pile up as much money as I can, and I know that my future will be all right. And Paul says, we'll see. Give an administration 2 years. We'll see how much that money is worth. You know what I'm saying? Okay, nobody understands what I'm saying. Paul says that's uncertain. He says it's uncertain. What you think you know, you don't know. And the money that you think can bring you or provide for you today an anticipation of safety and security and satisfaction for tomorrow, which is so uncertain, it's not enough. He said, instead, tell them to set their hope on God who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. Because whereas the money might not be the same tomorrow, he will be. So that's what Paul's saying here, right? And the reason why he's saying that is the definition of hope. It is something that we set our anticipation, our expectation of future happiness, security, satisfaction, and safety, okay? So let's understand that that's what the biblical definition of hope is. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 6. Hebrews chapter 6. And we're going to start reading in verse 11, because the writer of Hebrews here talks about that same type of hope. And here's what he says. Verse 11. And we desire, each one of you, to show the same earnestness, to have the full assurance of hope until the end. He says, show the same earnestness to have the full assurance of hope until the end. He says, work hard at hoping in the right thing all the way to the end. That's the goal, okay? He says, and here's why that's important, verse 12. So that you may not be sluggish, but imitators of those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. I love how this works, because what he's saying here is if you focus your energy into hoping right, then there are downstream impacts of that, right? There are things that you can do upstream which have impacts downstream. So when there's an oil slick coming from upstream, they don't deal with it where the ducts are. They go upstream because it will have impact downstream. A couple of years back, Rob Kroll, who's the principal over at Hillcrest, and I were talking, and I was just welcoming him to the north side, and I said, how can we have the greatest impact on Hillcrest? And he said, man, the number one issue is graduation rates. Well, right around that same time, the Holy Spirit was speaking to somebody in this church, Sharon Ellard, about setting up a tutoring program for first through third graders. What is that? Well, right at that age, first through third grade, helping those kids to be able to read better at that age impacts them all the way through their high school and further downstream than that. So a little bit of effort at first through third grade can be leveraged for huge impact downstream. Are you hearing what I'm saying here? Well, what the writer of Hebrews says here, probably not Paul, in spite of what Jeopardy thinks, not Paul, probably. For those of you who don't know, Google Jeopardy, Hebrews, it'll be great. But the writer of Hebrews here says, that's what hope is like. If you leverage your energy, if you are earnest about hoping in the right thing, so if you put your energy into hoping in the right thing, then downstream there's all kinds of positive impacts from that. Hope can be leveraged for far-reaching impact in our lives. Do you see that in this verse? That's what the verse says. If you hope in the right thing, first, you will not be sluggish. You'll be an imitator of those who, through faith and patience have inherited the promise. So he spells out faith and patience. You won't be sluggish. It helps you to be active if you hope in the right things. And that's not all of the benefits of hoping in the right things. If you look through Scripture, 1 John 3:3 says that hope will produce purity in you. In Romans 8:25, it will produce patience in you. In Romans 5:4-5, fulfillment in you. Joy, it's stability in Colossians 1:23. These are all the downstream impacts of hoping properly. So if you focus on one thing, focused on hoping right, on earnestly hoping till the end, right? And if you do that, then there's downstream implications of that. And then he goes on and he gives us an example. Here we go. Verse 13. For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, surely I will bless you and multiply you. And thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. For people swear by something greater than themselves, and in all their disputes, an oath is final for confirmation. So God makes a promise. And this is referring to Genesis chapter 22, verse 15, where he's talking to Abraham. And Abraham at that point has trusted God all the way to the point of trusting God with Isaac's life, right? To the point of sacrifice, right? He is totally trusting of God. And after he does that, God speaks to him and he says, I am going to bless you with descendants that are far more numerous than you could imagine. I'm going to make you into a nation. I will bless you. And then he says, and I swear it by myself. Which makes me ask the question, why would God need to swear at all? Because we swear by something when we need to verify or prove the honesty of our statement. So some people will say, I don't, but some people would say, man, I swear to God. I swear to God. I'm telling you the truth right now. I swear by this. I swear by that. We swear by something when we are really trying to prove that I'm telling the truth in this moment. But even Jesus said, if you're constantly promising something, does that mean that your yes is not your yes and your no is not your no on a regular basis? Right? Does that say something about the veracity of your everyday language, that you always are constantly having to prove it by swearing or by promising something? He said, just let your yes be your yes and your no be your no. And I've mentioned before that this is something I try to do. I try to just say yes and just say no and not have to promise, because if my kids are like, well, do you promise? That indicates to me that they have questions as to whether I'm saying a truthful thing on a regular basis. Well, why would God have to do that? Why would God have to swear by anything? Why? We know he is. He never lies. His yes is his yes. His no is his no. So why would he have to swear at all? Well, the writer of Hebrews actually tells us right next after this exactly why. He says, so when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath. What he's saying is, God's purpose was unchanging. His character, unchanging. We know that God's yes is his yes and his no is his no. But he wanted to show, look at the words, he desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise. This isn't because of his weakness, it's because of ours. Right? Because this is all we know. He understood and understands humanity. He gets that for us, time is the enemy of hope. That for us, he tells us something, and over time we lose some of our assurance of that. So, here's what he did. He said, here's what I'm going to do. And then he made a covenant. He promised it. First he said, here's what I'm going to do. But then he understands, man, these people, they might hold to that for a little while. But then after a little while, they're going to lose sight. I'm going to promise it. But that's not enough. That promise may not be enough for them to see them through the really hard times. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add to my promise an oath. Now, I can't swear by anything greater than me because there's nothing greater than me. So I'll swear by myself that I will do it. So he gives his word. He understands, these humans, okay, I'll make a promise. Okay, I'm going to give him an oath too. And as if that wasn't enough, and here's what it actually says about all of this. He says, so that, verse 18, so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. See, God wants us to hope properly. He knows the downstream benefits of it. And so if we hope properly, we get those other things as well, purity, patience, faith. We'll inherit the promise. And so he gives us everything we need in order to hold fast to that hope set before us, right? He gives us his word, then he gives us the promise, and as if the promise wasn't enough, he gives us an oath. But then he doesn't even stop there. Verse 19, we have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek. He gave us Jesus. He gave us Jesus. First he said it, and then he promised it. And then he made an oath. He swore it. But if that was not enough, he gave us Jesus. So, I've got a problem. I bought another Tesla. I haven't told Liz, so this is my moment to tell her. No, I'm just kidding. She knows. I bought another Tesla. And you're probably like, how can he afford another Tesla? I can't. So, here's how this works. There are a lot of dumb people out there. And with a Tesla, you order it, and you don't get it for like 12 months. And people can't wait that long. They're impatient. So if you order it, when it comes, you can sell it to some poor sucker for more than you paid for it and make a little profit. Right? So I've done this for a few years now. I've been flipping Teslas. You didn't know this, right? It's a little thing. I bought one, rented it out, and then I sold it for more than I paid for it. I bought another one. So about 8, 9, 10 months ago, somewhere in there, I ordered another one. And the way this works is they want to make sure if you order one, you're actually going to keep it. So they make you make a down payment. That down payment is $200. Now, $200, for me, I thought, I'll put $200 down. And if everything stays steady and people are still as dumb in December of 2022 as they are now, I'll just go ahead and flip it again, right? So yesterday was the day. I had to make a decision yesterday. Am I going to take delivery of this? And if I decided I wasn't going to take delivery of it, then that $200 is gone. That down payment of $200. Now, to me, $200, I had a chance to turn that $200 into more money, so I went ahead and did it. Put the down payment down. And yesterday they asked me, so do you want to take delivery of the car or not? And I looked out, and people have gotten less dumb over the last 8 months or something. Price of cars is not holding up like it once was. And so I just told them, no, I'm not going to take delivery. And they said to me, you know, if you walk away now, you'll lose that $200. And I said, if I don't walk away now, I'm going to have a car I can't afford. And I said, I'm walking away. And they said, okay, we'll keep your $200. It was easy for me to walk away from that because the value of $200 is not that high. If they had asked for a $2,000 down payment, I probably wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have done it to begin with. But if I had, what if they had asked for a $20,000 down payment? I wouldn't have done it to begin with. But if I had, I definitely wouldn't walk away, right? The reason why I'm able to walk away is I don't have that much skin in the game. I've made a deposit that is not of high enough value to keep me sticking to that purchase. That's what the writer of Hebrews is saying here. God sent Jesus, and Jesus now is a high priest before him. As if his word wasn't enough, he made a promise. As if his promise wasn't enough, he made an oath. And if his oath wasn't enough, he sent a down payment that he will never walk away from. And in Jesus, all those promises are yes and amen. And nothing will make him walk away from that. He has far too much skin in the game. And that is why this is a secure place to put the hope of humanity. It will not move. It is a secure anchor. In the mid-1950s, Billy Graham made a trip to Britain, to the UK, and immediately started packing out the stadiums there like he had been packing out the stadiums here, and pretty much everywhere he went, the stadiums were packed out. And so it caught the attention of Queen Elizabeth, and she wanted to meet him. And if you watch The Crown on Netflix, which is not a true story, just so you know, they kind of try to show what that might have been like when he met with the Queen. But she wasn't the only person whose attention it caught. At the time, Winston Churchill was still the Prime Minister in Britain. It was his second stint. See, if you don't know, Winston Churchill helped Britain, and really, in many ways, the world, through World War II, right up through the victory in Europe. And a month later, they voted him out. Like, within a month, they'd replaced him. They wanted new blood. They wanted new vision to look towards the future and the hope that was ahead of them now that they had gotten out of this dark time. The problem was, it didn't get brighter. The problem was, things continued to be dark and things were bleak. And so, for many reasons, right, the Cold War kept getting colder. In fact, right during that time, you might not know this, but Winston Churchill came to Missouri. And he gave a speech in a little town called Fulton, Missouri. If you don't know this, you should. It's less than 10,000 people. Winston Churchill came there and delivered a speech where he said, "An iron curtain is descending across the continent of Europe." And there, in that little town of Fulton, Missouri, he coined the term the Iron Curtain. So they voted him back in as prime minister because they realized this other guy wasn't getting the job done. But everything was bleak. It was bleak. People weren't rallying to him like they had during the war. And so Billy Graham gets a call from his office, and they say, "Hey, Winston Churchill, the prime minister, wants to meet with you." So Billy Graham goes. He gets there, and the person in the front office tells him, "Hey, you've got 20 minutes. You've only got 20 minutes. If you go past 20 minutes, the Duke of Windsor is up next, and he's got a meeting, and so you have to keep it short, right?" And so he goes in to see Churchill, and Churchill congratulates him on the success and says, "How in the world are you packing out these stadiums?" And he said, "Well, it's not me, it's God." And he said, "Oh, okay, but listen, if I and Marilyn Manson got," my voice is getting worse, like my accent, it was good right off the bat, but it's getting worse. Okay, so he said, "If I and Marilyn Monroe got together, we would not be able to pack out the stadiums like you have. Why do you think it is?" And he said, "Well, I think it's the gospel of Jesus Christ. People used to hear it here every week, but I think it's been a while." And he said, "Oh, okay. Times have changed, haven't they?" And then apparently he looked over at his desk and he saw all the newspapers spilled out or laid out, and he said to Billy Graham, he said, "I look in the papers and the headlines are wars and fears and murder and theft." And he said, "I see no hope for the human race." And Billy Graham said in his autobiography many years later that Churchill used the word hopeless 9 different times in the conversation. And then in a moment of honesty, he looked at Billy Graham and said, "I am a man without hope in this world. Do you have any hope for me?" And I wonder, If Winston Churchill were standing in front of you, what would you say in that moment? Billy Graham's told him the gospel. You might not have to answer it for him, but you do have to answer it for yourself. And friends, you don't just have to answer it for yourself. There are people all around you who are asking you the same question that Winston Churchill asked Billy Graham. Do you have any hope for me? Because it's getting colder. And if you haven't noticed, the price of propane's going up this year. Who's filled up propane recently? Who's been watching the prices of natural gas? For me, I just tried to buy some wood. 2 months ago, I called a guy. We don't heat our house with wood, but we like to keep some on hand, and we have enough for this year, but I knew by next year, because you never get actual seasoned wood. You need to buy it if you're going to buy it at least a year ahead of time, because they can say it's seasoned, but they just cut it. You know what I'm saying? And anyways, okay, this is my issue. But anyway, so he told me, man, I'm like 12 weeks out. He still hasn't called me back. When we were in Germany, man, there was stockpiled wood everywhere. You think it's weird here in Europe where they're reliant upon gas from Russia? Man, things are really bleak, and you could feel it. There's fear for the winter. Because if you don't know it, Russia is weaponizing winter. Right? This is their pressure point, because this is the tool that they have, and so they're using it. And I guess we just keep ending up in the same place, right? Like, because even a couple months ago, see, in 2014, Russia annexed the Crimea. You might not care about this, but this is what's going on. In 2014, they annexed Crimea, said, yeah, this belongs to us now. And Ukraine said, no, that's ours. That's a part of us. No, it belongs to us now. And Russia had the weapons to be able to do that, and so they took it. So, 2017, 18, 19, they built this massive bridge because Crimea is not connected to Russia's homeland. So they built this massive bridge between them to connect them. A couple months ago, and Putin was the first one, by the way, who drove across that bridge when they opened it. It was a big celebration. A couple months ago, Ukraine bombed it. It's not confirmed that it was Ukraine, but it was Ukraine. They bombed it, blew it up. Everybody's like, yeah. I was like, yeah, go Ukraine. And then Russia said, okay, you want to do that? And they just started blowing up utilities all across Ukraine. For the last several months, they've been doing this, sending cruise missiles. And not just cruise missiles, but drones that they're buying from Iran and elsewhere in order to bomb Ukraine and weaponize winter so that they do not have the utilities. And they say the reason why they're doing it is because they bombed that bridge. They probably planned on it all along. But this week, as I was reading about Milwaukee, that hit a little different. Because here we are all these years later, and we're still fighting wars over bridges. See, some people think that the human race is progressing to a higher level of consciousness and that we're evolving and getting past all of those things. But I don't see that. I see us ending up right back where we started over and over and over and over and over again. And the question is, in that cycle, what can bear the weight of our hope? Because there will be little distractions that come along as people come together for a brief moment, for a blink of an eye, and we'll invest all the same emotional energy again to say, there's hope for humanity. But that cannot bear the weight of it. What we need is a God who does not change, who gave his word, then added a promise, then gave an oath to, and eventually made a down payment that he will never walk away from. We need something like that to be the hope for humanity, and that is Christmas. It is hope for humanity hidden in a hay trough. And he grows up, and he dies for our sins, and he rises again and advocates on our behalf now before the Father. He is our anchor. Last summer, as a family, we went to Table Rock Lake, and we rented a boat, and we went out on the lake, and as part of that, we rented the boat just for a little while to spend some time, and Everything was taken care of as part of that, except one thing. They didn't give us an anchor. And they didn't give us an anchor because they used to provide anchors. But the problem was, people would take the anchor and throw it in the water. But they wouldn't stop to make sure that it was tied on the other side to the boat. Seriously, this is what they told me. They said, oh yeah, we used to give anchors. We don't give anchors anymore because people don't make sure that it's tied to the boat. They throw it in the water and they go, oh. Apparently, all the way across Table Rock Lake, there are anchors sitting at the bottom of the water. They're totally secure. And I guess that's the question. At least that's the question for me. Because Jesus Christ is absolutely and totally secure. God gave his word, added to it his promise, and then he gave us an oath. But humanity, man, they're fickle. I will send a down payment that I will never walk away from. Now he advocates on the other side of the veil before the Father himself. He is secure. The question is, are we holding to the other side of the anchor? That's why Hebrews 6:18 says to us, for we who have fled for refuge might have, what does he want us to have? Strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. And then in Hebrews 10:23, let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. Christ, our anchor, is secure. No amount of winds or waves have ever overwhelmed him. He is secure. All the passing things change. He does not. He is an anchor that is secure. But an anchor that isn't tied to your boat is worthless. It's totally secure, but if you're not holding to the other end of the line, you got nothing. Jesus is not a dead concept. He is not a secret knowledge that we uncode. He's not an empty ritual that we enact. He is a living person that we relate to. And if you told me, Alan, I'm maxed out, I know you're asking me for something here. I could tell. You're about to ask me for something. You're like, I'm maxed out. I got 99%. I got nothing else. I would say to you, take that 1% you've got left and invest it in earnestly hoping. If you told me, man, I got 5 minutes left in the day that's not spoken for by kids or work or this or that. I got 5 minutes. I would say take those 5 minutes and leverage it by deliberately turning mentally, emotionally, the object of your hope, your expectation for future satisfaction, safety, and security, turning it towards him. Take that 1%, take that 5 minutes, and it'll pay off for you all over the place downstream. So take 5 minutes and take that anxiety about what will happen tomorrow. Take that fear for what might be coming down the pike. And take that with 5 minutes, with 1%, to him and say, I can't do this. It is too much for me. I need you. I need your help. And remind yourself in your own brain or using your own words, he gave his word. And as if that wasn't enough, he made a promise. And if that wasn't enough, he gave an oath. And then he sent his son as a down payment. This is secure. So as everybody else is running around talking about the prices of natural gas or propane, as others are fearing about what tomorrow might hold, you know with absolute security who holds your tomorrow. He's got it for you. And then what happens as a result? You are standing in front of them, and they say to you, I have no hope in this world. Do you have some hope for me? And you say, yes, yes, I do. Because I don't care about those other things. I care about Jesus. And he was sent in order to be an absolute secure deposit on my tomorrow. That's what hope looks like. And that's what Christmas is. Be